Have you ever heard of the Republic of Nauru? With high unemployment, inflation, a banking crisis, and failed foreign investments, this tiny island in the South Pacific was the scene of the worst economic recession ever. It's the third smallest country in the world, after Monaco and Vatican City, with a land area of just 8 square miles and less than 11,000 people. Consider the enormous oil wealth that several of the Persian Gulf republics enjoy. Yet, if natural resource wealth is not well managed, it can have a negative long-term impact, to the point where some economists even refer to it as a natural resource curse. You may be thinking, there's no such thing as curses. Well, today, you're in for a treat. Wait until you see what happened to Nauru due to this natural resource curse. You won't believe this. This tiny country of Pacific Islands is perhaps the best example of what can go wrong in a nation's economy. The lesson of Nauru is one that all economists can learn from. In today's video, we're going to reveal how Nauru became the richest nation on Earth. Wait until you see what errors they made that drove them to lose this wealth too. Also, we'll uncover how this small nation truly became worse off over time. Stick around until the end, you won't want to miss this. The island of Nauru was first made known to Europeans in 1789, when a British ship passed by a region with a central plateau covered with greenery, surrounded by swaying palm trees and bordered by white sand beaches. The British gave the island the name Pleasant Island because of its stunning scenery. Nauru, which is only a third the size of Manhattan, had its first outsiders move there a few decades later. At first, it was assumed that the only resources on the island were pigs and coconuts. That is, until a British geologist unexpectedly discovered high-grade phosphate ore. Just imagine the wild ride this high-grade phosphate ore took the Republic of Nauru on. It couldn't possibly be that bad, right? So, how did Nauru become the richest nation on Earth? To put it plainly, the nation didn't become oil-rich. The scientists discovered dried bird droppings and algae instead, which was somehow more valuable because it could be utilized primarily in fertilizers, but also in cosmetics and animal feed. When it was discovered around the beginning of the 20th century, 80% of Pleasant Island was covered in this mineral, a previously unknown treasure of accumulated seabird poo mixed with marine microorganisms. That might sound horrible, but it was vital to feeding a growing world population, making it quite valuable. So, how did everything go so well and then so wrong so quickly? Mining rights were promptly sold to Germany, who at the time had colonized Nauru. As shipping ports, processing plants and supporting industries sprang up on a spit of land barely larger than New York's Central Park over the next few years, nearly 80 million metric tons of this valuable substance were exported from the tiny island. At this moment in time, precisely the year 1914, when Germany was occupied with the First World War, Australia was met with an opportunity to seize Nauru for itself. Just imagine how much money Nauru was able to make while exporting almost 80 million metric tons during this time. By this time, the island had recently developed into an offshore mining facility. Most phosphate was sold to farmers in Australia, New Zealand and Great Britain at subsidised prices, or mates rates, as they say in Australia. Regrettably, decades of mining had already significantly altered the natural terrain of Nauru by this point. The top half of the island was then labelled a ghastly tract of land by National Geographic. This new nickname was quite dramatically a downgrade from Pleasant Island. It only gets worse from here on out. Imagine the drastic changes the island has gone through for a name change like that. How can it possibly get any worse? Japan conquered the island during World War II, terrorizing Nauru with forced labor camps and mass drownings. Only 600 Naurusians remained alive at the end of World War II. When the war was finished and Japan surrendered, the island was once again given to the Australians, who continued to exploit the island's smelly resources. Phosphate mining activities reached historic record highs between 1945 and 1968. Nobody was pushing the Naurusians to mine phosphate when they finally gained their independence in 1968, but at that time, their whole economy already depended on selling this natural resource. Even though Nauru was able to achieve its own independence after all, unfortunately, things don't get much better economically. Let's see what happens next. Independence Nauru had lost a third of its islands to mining, and its people now resided nearby in a wasteland that was suddenly even more horrifyingly appealing. All economies are constrained by the production elements of land, labour and capital. But in the case of Nauru, these restrictions were severe. the limited inhabitants of this island had only been capable of digging stench-filled rocks out of the ground. Different types of industries were just impossible due to their small size and remote location in the world. So, how was Nauru able to become so wealthy after losing it all? Let's find out. You won't want to miss this. This marks the beginning of a period in Nauru's history when some referred to it as the Pacific's richest small island. A little more than 10 years after gaining independence, Nauru was acclaimed as the world's richest nation overall in terms of per capita income. Its GDP per capita in 1981 was $27,000, which is equivalent to $88,000 in today's dollars. In comparison, the US GDP per capita at the time was $14,000. The average Nauruan was therefore twice as wealthy as the average American. Naturally, the GDP per capita is a far from accurate indicator of how well the typical citizen is doing. Just imagine how wealthy the people of Nauru were during this time. They were far more wealthy than the average American. Next, we'll see how they enjoyed this wealth while they had it. Nauru was now prospering on its own thanks to their rich phosphate reserves and political independence. Many people in Nauru took the advice given to retired sports stars to heart and retired at the height of their success. After all, people could readily rely on the government's provision of free healthcare and education, as well as landowners' royalties from phosphate revenue. Many residents had the option of choosing not to work. At the same time, Nauru had experienced all kinds of bizarre events. Can you guess what it could be? As if this tiny nation hasn't been through enough already, let's find out what kinds of bizarre events they experienced next. Despite the small size of the nation, sports cars were a luxury to have. The island's entire perimeter can be driven around casually in an hour, so it's hardly the best location for drag racing. One police chief made the decision to bring a Lamborghini to the island, but afterwards discovered he couldn't fit in the driver's seat. He was unable to use his new gadget because of an emerging public health crisis on the island. An epidemiologist reported that Nauru had an obesity pandemic by 1980. Increased prosperity and unhealthy food choices were the underlying causes. Nauru's obesity pandemic cannot be that big of a problem, right? Surely they can fix it with their wealth, perhaps. Let's see what happens next. The World Health Organization listed Nauru as having the lowest life expectancy of 170 countries in 2002, due to the country's high consumption of junk food, high average body mass index, and high rate of obesity. Healthy native meals like fish and coconuts were replaced by imported ones. An additional effect of mining. Serious economic consequences could also result from the workforce's bad health. Not being able to fit in your new Lamborghini suddenly seems like a relatively minor inconvenience in light of the broader effects of the obesity epidemic. What do you think about Nauru's obesity pandemic? Is everyone on the island just not educated enough to know about the risks associated with obesity? Let's take a closer look at Nauru's health situation. The typical diet consists of quick noodles, white rice, canned goods, and soda. Binge drinking and using tobacco are both commonplace. On her visit, anthropologist Amy McLennan of the University of Oxford said, "I was lucky to locate one vegetable a week." It's interesting to note that Naurusians indeed are well educated and aware of the dangers of poor nutrition and obesity. There are several educational initiatives promoting healthy eating within Nauru. The issue was rather a lack of availability to healthy meals. So, you might be wondering, what about Nauru's own farms and livestock? Well, let's take a look. The decades-long phosphate mining process severely damaged the ecosystem, virtually eliminating the agricultural sector. Spoiler alert, after the phosphate ran out, the economy collapsed, leaving most Naurusians able to only buy low-quality processed food. The Naurusian people only received a little portion of the income created by phosphate mining during the colonial era. Given this background, rather than greed, they were motivated to continue mining after independence by economic need. A lifestyle where everything must be imported, including food and water, is not sustainable. Nobody bothered to waste time on manufacturing or agriculture since phosphate mining received all the focus. So it seems, after all, that the natural resource curse is what led Nauru to this horrible outcome. After all, the topsoil was removed for mining operations, therefore the area was already overused for farmland. The leaders of Nauru were aware of the need to diversify their economy in order to survive, and they made an effort to enter new industries. One was offshore banking, which at the start of the 1990s led to licenses for some 400 foreign banks. Although the Nauruan bank branches first enjoyed great success, the achievement was at best the result of a dubious strategy. consumers would open a bank account without travelling to the island. One might easily obtain a Nauruan passport through so-called economic citizenship, turning the nation into a haven for tax evasion and money laundering. It just seems like it's one tragedy after another for the country of Nauru. By 2001, they had run out of phosphate completely, and practically all of their foreign investments had failed. The nation became so impoverished that even the central bank declared bankruptcy. Unemployment had reached 90%, and the educational system had mostly collapsed. Just to be clear, just a few years ago, this was the world's richest nation. Today, Nauru's economy is barely alive due to assistance it receives from Australia. A former Nauru Congregational Church preacher named James Angimeya was born in 1911 and basically lived through everything. To a reporter for the New York Times, Angimeya said, "I wish we'd never discovered that phosphate. I wish Nauru could look like it was before, when I was a boy. It was so beautiful. There were trees, it was green everywhere, and we could eat fresh coconuts and breadfruit. Now I see what's happened here and I want to cry. And there's one thing more tragic than Nauru's economic collapse, and that's not being subscribed to Top Business TV. Subscribe below to support the channel to see more videos like this one."